Gentlemen, do you understand that we are recording this?
I do. Yes, indeed.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody. This is John and Derek with the Denver Construction Careers Pilot Program. And we are joined today by Bart Berger of HistoriCorps and Dane Cowan, who's a trainer. And they're here to talk to us about the first cohort of students that went through Denver Parks and Rec's Historic Preservation Training Program. So with that, Derek, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, John. My first question is really going to be directed more towards you, Bart, with HistoriCorps. And I know you're a veteran in the world of restoration and preservation. Can you tell us more about HistoriCorps and how you initially got involved, and tell us about what roles you're playing today with HistoriCorps?
Well, my path to HistoriCorps started years ago when I was on the board of the Colorado Historical Society, now known as History Colorado. I was on that board for about 20 years, and I chaired the board for about 6. At that point, I became very interested in the Denver Mountain Parks system, which is this huge system of parks outside the city of Denver, and all of the historic resources and shelters and historic fabric that's in there became fascinating to me because it had been not, let's just say, well taken care of. So it became sort of a cause for me, and because I care about Denver and I care about the assets that the citizens of Denver own, it occurred to me that somebody had to kind of, there needed to be sort of a voice out of the wilderness to say, hey, but what about this? So with my historic stuff and I'm a 4th generation Denver kid. So I kind of know a little bit about the city and the history of it, and it all kind of coalesced there.
Mm-hmm.
Part of Denver Mountain Parks is the Civilian Conservation Corps properties. There are more than one, and one of which is the particular one down in the just outside of Morrison. I became aware of HistoriCorps essentially because I was there at the inception of it when I was on the board of History Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Then through my associations with Historic Denver and all of that, it was just a natural understanding. It was just kind of like the preservation partners, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
But HistoriCorps needed a change in some of its physical locations and where it could put some of its tools and equipment and trucks and its offices as well. And part of the restoration effort at the old CCC campus in Morrison, I thought, availed itself for just exactly that kind of a thing. And I thought that there was great synergy to be had there. So I worked with some others, and we put together a plan where HistoriCorps could come and occupy one of the old barracks after restoration by the city, and they put an awful lot of money into that, and thus has begun a great restoration effort there, which I can wax on about. The point is that the effort for that got me involved in HistoriCorps' operations. And they liked me for some reason. And next thing I know, the executive director retired, and I foolishly said, well, until you find a real executive director, I guess I could step in for a while and do that. So I'm currently the executive director of HistoriCorps, still sitting on the board of the Denver Mountain Parks Foundation, which I formed. And still an annoying preservationist.
No, not annoying at all, Bart. But some of what I heard you talk about kind of leads me to a question for Dane, because you talked about the HistoriCorps for sure, but you also talked about the site in Mountain Parks, and I know the city selected Catherine Craig Park for the site for this cohort pilot. Dane, as the lead trainer, tell our audience about the site and what the students learn from participating in this program, including trades that the cohorts may have been exposed to.
Well, first off, the site at Catherine Craig Park was originally built CCC's also as a work project, and I believe that crew of CCC participants worked at the Chief Hosa campground and were responsible for building that the structure up there. And through the years, the park itself, the grounds fell into Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. Prior to that, the Army, was involved with it. And this particular building, the garage, is an awesome example for me for a laboratory, as it's been preserved by neglect. And I love that word, because that concept means that nobody's ever done anything to the building. Well, there were lots of things done, but that's part of the history and the story of the building. So what the participants were able to do was they were able to walk into this building that they'd never seen before. It was kind of derelict. We talked about, what do we want to do here? How can we change this? And let's also look at the history of this building, see what we can find out. We found very little history, written history, but through physical exploration, we could start seeing how the building evolved. Changes, additions. There's still tons of questions unanswered about that building. And that's one of the exciting things about working in a site like this. So the participants were really excited about that, I think. Then when we physically started doing the hands-on type, this was a whole new experience for most of them. We started out with simple basic techniques of plumb and level and those kinds of concepts with water levels and plumb bobs, and then once they grasped that, we were able to explore, well, these are lines that are constant. They'll always be this way. How do we make the building fall into those? So they got to experience, things like saws and hammers and screw guns and fasteners. And we sawed up pieces of concrete to pour new foundations, make repair to dry rot on the posts. That was one of our tasks in that project. So what they learned, I think, was some basic tool techniques, but they also learned a process, to go from A to B and then get to C through that.
Right. Thank you. Now this next question is for either or both of you. Why is historic restoration and preservation important?
Well, I'll start out with the fact that historic preservation is a way to preserve a record of the history of a building, preserve a record of the participants of the building and what their lifestyle was at the time. I'm a firm believer, and I think it's well proven, that many buildings outlive their occupants. So we might have 10 occupants in a building that's only 200 years old, or we might only have 2 occupants. The other thing that historic preservation and restoration is important about is that I totally support the concept of reusing a building. It's a resource. We can reclaim. I mean, we have something already. Let's improve on it. And that's one of the other than the fact that let's preserve history. I like preservation and restoration work to go a little bit deeper than just that.
Great, thank you, Bart. What about you?
I see it I see its importance for the fact that it's not just about the property; it's about the people. And you'll hear me say that numerous times. What happens when you enter into a historic preservation situation is that you become involved in the continuum of that structure and the stories that are connected with it, not only the occupants but the people who created it. So that's kind of fun, because then you become interwoven into the lifespan of the structure, and to the extent that your involvement, you derive some skills out of it, is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But you derive a sense of your own part of the flow of things. We have a tendency, I believe, in modern culture to look at things at a moment-to-moment reality level. We see things, and then as they are now, we don't spend a lot of time seeing how things have evolved. And I think, as you see, not only the skills and how they have evolved in the construction, but you begin to see the kind of the why of it. And that's why I really get sort of turned on by the whole thing, because it's a window that opens up to an awful lot of sort of a three-dimensional view on the past.
Mm-hmm. Great. Now, historic preservation and restoration is such a unique niche. What strategies would you offer young people to pursue a job or a career in this particular field? I mean, how does one go about, getting connected to this type of work?
Well, I think about when I started this work. I've been involved in the construction trades for 45 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was introduced to it at a time when in the city of Eureka in California, where restoration was just this new thing, the preservation. It was exploding in parts of Eureka, as well as throughout the country. There was this new wave of restoration. So I was fortunate to work for a man who was keyed into this. I mean, that's what he was doing. He had historic properties, and he wanted to maintain them, and so that got my juices flowing. So, but there's historical societies.
Mm-hmm.
There are trades networks, but I think the thing that is so important is to find a group to get connected up to, and start physically doing the work, the touch, the feel, the concept. I mean, there's this whole thing that happens once you get on the field, or go hang out at old places. If nothing else, go to old buildings and hang out. Take half an hour and just sit there in that building and look around and see what you notice. And that's something that I really encourage people to do, is to in the very beginning of a project, go hang out, talk to the building, get used to it, let it get used to you, and then things just start to open up all over the place. You start recognizing, well, this window's rotten. But let's go beyond just the window's rotten. What do we need to do to repair that window? Oh, who's our resources for that? There's educational programs at colleges. There's a ton of information available. But I think to encourage people to get involved in young people, especially involved in the historical work, is to get them impassioned about it. Get
One
them
of the
to
things that HistoriCorps has done is, since its inception, is to work on projects for the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management and other National Park Service, a number of other federal and state agencies across the country. And one of its tenets is to work with volunteers and to teach these preservation skills to the volunteers as they help in the restoration projects. Mm-hmm. So what Dane says is quite valid, but there are other opportunities as well, and HistoriCorps has tried to provide them so that. And we also work with youth corps and job corps programs around the country, as well as in the Denver metropolitan area, so that there are avenues. Mm-hmm. It has to do with, don't be shy. Just go dig your nose into it, because historic restoration people love you.
Let me ask this question, because I know, Bart, through your encouragement, Mayor Hancock and Executive Director for Parks and Rec, Happy Haynes, wanted to realize this program. I think we had talked about it for a while, but they wanted to put the rubber to the road, so to speak. They wanted to pilot this. They wanted to test to see if this was something that would be viable for helping to build the pipeline for this particular area. And one of the things I'd like to hear from you guys is what advice would you give our city leadership on how we move this program forward? I know the mayor was extremely delighted with what he saw and more importantly, what he heard, I think, from the participants in the cohort. But as we grow the program, as we look to evolve the program, what advice would you give the city in keeping this program in the front of mind like it is now?
Well, I guess let me just jump in real quick, and that is, we have stuff we got to do, and we have stuff in picking Denver. We have stuff that needs to be done to all manner of public places and cultural icons, civic centers. I picked that one at random. There's all manner of things that need to be done around the city. And as the city involves themselves in contracting that out, a part of what they do should include workforce training, because it's not just about fixing the property. It's about helping the people. The people own this stuff. They need to benefit not only from the product, but also the process. So that's kind of where my short speech on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dane, I know you were boots on the ground with this, and operationally you were there day in and day out, facilitating the training. What advice would you give us in helping to ensure that we are bringing forth the best candidates for these types of training programs?
Well, I think first off, it's just getting a bunch of people there, and I think that there's a validity to this program continuing, not just for the summer program. Mm-hmm. I think momentum drops out. I think that the Denver workforce is a good source of participants, and I'm assuming that the participants, once they left this program, this pilot program, they've interacted with other people in the workforce program, mm-hmm. and that's really significant, because these people, I'm hoping that other people in the workforce are going to go, shoot, I want to try that. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the greatest things we can do, and it doesn't matter the numbers, it doesn't matter what doesn't matter is the participants' aptitude or abilities, because yeah, they'll learn what they're going to learn. Mm-hmm. But when they start talking and working with the other people in their groups, that's going to say more than you or I or Bart can ever say. When I know for myself, when I hear something from one of my coworkers or something about something, it's great. I love it. So I think I would suggest more participants. They don't need to know how to do anything, because that's not what we're about here. But I think the city can promote from within.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I know one of our goals is really to begin to develop a strong pipeline, because cities like Denver have a number of historical sites and a number of historical what I would call structures that really need to get that type of support for either restoration or preservation of these structures. And so one of my final questions for you guys is if you had a magic wand, so to speak, and you could wave that magic wand, what would, I mean, and I know, Dane, you talked about perhaps having a cohort beyond just the summer and 6 weeks, and really looking at establishing, it sounds like more like a year-round kind of program where, things can be done in the winter that you don't do in the summer, and things vice versa, things that you can do in the summer that you just can't do in the winter. How do you envision that happening? I mean, because Denver Parks and Denver Mountain Parks has a number of different sites and structures. How do you see that unfolding in more of a long-term or year-round process? What would you see that looking like?
Well, I would see it as here's a concept. If we're talking magic wands and things.
Yeah, I need it.
Okay, so, and I've had this conversation with a couple people already, but it seems to me a good model would be selecting the group of people are selected. But I say, why don't we then start looking at various neighborhoods? Let's start looking at some of the cultures that are involved in that neighborhood. Let's start to empower the people that live in that neighborhood or want to be involved in that neighborhood with some pride in that particular place, or maybe their grandmother lived in that house. So there's I think this whole thing we're talking about can become a generational project. I think if we get people involved in projects, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, they're going to reach out to other people that they know too. And when that starts to happen, there's a certain amount of, I would say, ownership and pride that starts to get established. And that's going to drive the success of the program more than anything else, I think. A sense of ownership and a sense of pride. And whatever ownership and whatever pride, that gets made up anyway.
Now, Bart, we didn't forget you. You have a magic wand also, so I definitely want to kind of hear your thoughts as well.
Well, I really don't so much live in magic wand things. I try to work with, what do we have? What are the tools that are available to us? But we have all the tools. We don't need a magic wand. What we need is people to say, you know, as a government, we have resources and we have talent available, and we have the people that can put those together. And we have a cultural, diverse community, and we can benefit all of them and have them derive a sense of civic pride as a result of having worked on something that is relevant to them. Mm-hmm. It's overcoming what I find, what I've seen is the lack of trust, that there's a lack of trust. Mm-hmm. What I saw this summer was that some young people who came and went, I'm not really so sure what this is going to be about, and they were a little tight. But at the end of it, they went, this was wonderful, because what they understood was that it wasn't something that was being done to them, or that they weren't being used, that it was being done for them. And that's when they begin to see that the benefit is being done for their purposes, or for their benefit, then I think we relax and we can interrelate with each other. So I'm a big fan of the way that we've done it. This wasn't a make work thing. This was a make people thing. Mm-hmm. And then they become your magic wand, because they then start, that enthusiasm, that involvement, that commitment, that part of it, that part of the fabric that they now appreciate, as Dane said, then they, that spreads. This sort of thing is contagious. Mm-hmm. Pride is contagious, and I think that's what we want to do, is pride in a community, but not just parts of it, but all of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, do you before I ask this question, John, did you have any other questions that you wanted to cover? I know I've covered most of them, but wanted to give you an opportunity, kind of based on some of what you've heard, to offer questions as well.
Sure. I just want to add on to that last question. Could either of you see this program, maybe, it's in such an infancy stage right now, but could you see something like this rolling out perhaps nationally, that other cities or other areas might find this to be a worthwhile program?
Let me just jump right in and say, you bet. As a matter of fact, right currently we're working with a group in a small town in northern Arkansas, who have some in a small community. It's a mixed race community, and they're very interested in some of their historic properties. And we're putting together a workforce there that of the people who live in the community, to train them about how those skills are in the skills that it takes to restore it, and let them do the restoration of it for their own purposes. And absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add to what Bart said. There is a need, and I hate to use that kind of phrase, a need, because but there is a need for interest in preserving our history, and when that history relates to buildings and sites, not just buildings but sites, I think that stuff's all over the country. Mm-hmm. And it is an important. I've been working on a job off and on where I didn't know it, but there's a cemetery on the property. A family cemetery, a private cemetery. Well, that's the perfect source of local history. I mean, I haven't seen the place. I've not been invited to it yet, but there's about 20 graves that are marked, and some that probably aren't marked. Mm-hmm. And that's when I'm talking about sites There's botanical sites, there's archaeological sites, and there's something as simple as a cemetery. And those kinds of things are all over the country, all over the world. So to answer your question, John, yeah.
All right, that's great. Is there anything else you would like to share with us today? Any other thoughts or any other burning opinions about what we can do to kind of help grow this pipeline?
I think that it's a good thing to know that what we're after is to benefit not only just one generation of people, but that we're sort of training the trainers. Part of what we're trying to be the catalyst for is an interest and a passion for this kind of work, with an understanding of the benefits of it, and that it's not limited to the people who have heretofore been interested in historic preservation. It's common to all of us, and to that extent, we all have an obligation to pay a bit of it forward. But I would also add, without having been asked, that we also have an obligation to, when we're teaching architecture or we're teaching these skills, to those who might be building new things, to keep in mind that maybe you build not just for today, maybe you also build for tomorrow. In that sense, I'm kind of a preemptive, I'm a preemptive preservationist. Let's think about the preservation when we start, and then we start caring about the stuff that we have. But that's kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about. But it is something that I think, civic pride goes to, the creation of civic assets as well as the preservation of the old ones.
Thank you. What about you, Dane?
Well, years ago, I came across a quotation by John Ruskin, and this is what it says. And this has been, since I've seen this, I've taken it on as a philosophy. But here's what it says: when we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight, nor for present use alone. Let it be such work that our descendants will thank us for, and let us think, as we lay stone on stone, that a time is to come when these stones will be held sacred because our hands have touched them, and that man will say, as they look upon the labor and wrought substance of them, see, our Father did this for us. Wow. I saw this thing. It's a quotation out of a set of books that I have several copies and several editions of, but that's on the opening page. So I guess that would summarize my thoughts on that.
Powerful. It's powerful.
That's extremely powerful. Both of you guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to join us here today. And we look forward to continuing to work with HistoriCorps as we build and evolve our program here in the city and county of Denver. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yep, glad to be able to share.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again so much, Bart and Dane. We appreciate it. And to mirror Derek's statement there, we hope to be working with you again very, very soon. Thank you guys both. You have a good day.
Yeah.